think it's on Twitch now. Yeah, it's on Twitch now. So then, like, people that want to, if you miss a session, you can watch. They're always about, most of the sessions are always like 2 hours or so, 2.5 hours, something like that. So I'm gonna stream just some of the content now because there's a couple people that were supposed to come that weren't able to come. So by streaming it, that means they can watch it later and then they can make characters if they want to. So basically, there's a role-playing system called Call of Cthulhu, which is like a system that's been out for about 20 years, and there's a bunch of like different source material, and it takes place in 3 different time periods: 1890, 1920s, and then like present day, like 1960s, 1980s. That's like sort of a modern day version. And it's all based on Lovecraft's like original stories. So originally my plan was to do it in London because like years ago I ran a game called New London that ended up becoming like this gigantic campaign.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that was the one that Rob started, and that was like the first game that we played together like 10 years ago or something ridiculous.
Or even longer now.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Actually,
not
so one of the things that happened, so we were playing this crazy game, and Fluency was in it, and a bunch of other people were in it, and then he left to go to England, and so the game continued without him. He was living in the UK, and so his character sort of got like killed off at one point, so we left, and then he came back to visit, and he didn't tell people that he was back, because he was back a couple days early. So I got him to come over to my house like an hour before the game started, and he hid in my bedroom, and no one knew he was there. And we started playing the game, and people had found at one point in the game this diving helmet that allowed people to like manipulate time. But it started getting really fucked. Like they started fucking with it.
This wasn't that Lovecraft one.
It wasn't. Yeah, it was a Lovecraft one. Yeah, it was a Cthulhu-based sort of like Lovecraft. It was more steampunky though.
Yeah.
And anyway, and so they found this helmet, and they started fucking with the timeline. And they fucked with the timeline. No one knew how to use it. So when they roll to try and use it, it was really difficult to succeed. So even if you failed, something still happened, but you didn't know what happened. So they started fucking with the timeline. And one of the things they've done is they changed it so that they hadn't fought the boss that had killed his character, and they forgot that they had that timeline had changed it so they hadn't, and that he had died from that character. So basically, what happened is they got back from a mission. And when they got back from mission, he was waiting for them in their home base. And when I said they walked into the room and there's a figure like sitting by the fire, and you sort of recognize the person's like the back of their head. And then he walked out and was like, and then he was like, hey guys, it was like, and everyone just went fucking ape shit, right? Yeah. So then after that, like, I think that whole session, like, we stopped playing that night because it was like obvious that he was like,
I don't think you can top that.
No, it was like super. It was, and I've had a few other like similar situations and when cool things have happened, but that's like one of like my top like 2 or 3. Like, yeah, it was fun. So anyway, you've played a lot of GURPS before. You're fairly new. We've played a little bit before in the previous game that was modern. This game has got a little bit more realism, or at least a little bit more like squishiness in terms of character points. Like you've only got 100 points to make a character, and then like 10 points of disadvantages to keep it really
concentrated.
Well, it also means that like you've got to be a lot more careful about like what you're doing in the game. You can't just go like crazy and think you're going to survive. Like you've got to really work together to kind of succeed as a team, so to speak. And so there's also like the stat cap. So like Dex and IQ can't be higher than 12. Skills can't be higher than 13, I think, is what I've put. And then you will be able to have 2 or 3 skills that are at like a 15 or a 16. And those are like, yeah, so like if you're like a surgeon, your surgeon skills will be a 16, but nothing else will be that. So
get the surgeon in, just roll.
Right. And the reason why they put it at 16 is because 16 is the minimum to increase the critical success from 4 to 5. So you run 3 to 5 instead of 3 to 4 to critically succeed. So it makes it a little bit easier to kind of get a critical success, which makes you more like a hero. So anyway, so this game is based on Lovecraftian horror, so to speak. And it's based on this other existing game that's been out for 20 years called Cthulhu, where all the characters are investigators, and they are all kind of assembled in a loose kind of organization to explore and to deduce various odd happenings. Originally, it was going to, like I said before, originally it was going to take place in London. That's where we diverted. It was going to take place in 1920s London. Instead, what I've done is I've moved it back to Arkham, which is like the original location, Arkham, Massachusetts, same time period, 1920s. That allows me to have a huge amount of source material in order to build the campaigns of the books and the ideas
Just
of the
makes the world
characters.
building a little easier.
Yeah, I have so much content I can draw on. I'm probably also going to be using some of the modules. I've never really played I've never really played. I don't like modules all that much, but I feel like the way that this game works, modules work. It's because there's a lot of content that's available in the module. So what I've done is I've taken this Call of Cthulhu game and some of the source material and I've modified it to work in GURPS. So we're still playing the GURPS system because that's what I know and what I love, and it makes it easier to roll and easier to play, but then we've got all the source material that's available. The idea of the game is that the characters are all from different walks of life, and they've all sort of assembled under they've all been invited to this rich old man's house in different ways, and depending on how your character is created, there will be a unique way that you're bought into the game. So once you start giving me a little bit more backstory about how you want your character to be, we'll work out how you get sort of invited into the fold. But basically, the end result is that all of the different investigators will be kind of living in this old man's mansion, which will be split up. It'll have like a library, it'll have like a kitchen, it'll have all these different
Like a
areas.
proper benefactor.
Yeah, exactly. So you have like a patron, right? And he will have a number of skills and a number of resources, a number of things that you'll be able to draw on in order to succeed in your missions, so to speak.
Sorry, is that like...
Yeah, there's some jazz playing. And so
The poltergeist upstairs.
Woo!
Just plays cool jazz every now and then.
That's all you need. All you need is cool jazz once and then your life is complete. So basically, yeah, there'll be a benefactor and you'll be loosely involved in the first few stories to kind of give you a little bit of a soft introduction to the party. There might also be some non-player characters who will be like other heroes or other investigators that were part of the sort of under the benefactor's care before you guys show up. And so some of them will go out on some investigations with you just to kind of soft serve you into the world and the way that it works. It's a little bit different in the way that we played the other game, where it's sort of like a sandbox and you guys kind of like move through the world kind of organically. In this, it's similar in a way to some degree as the way that original Cthulhu game was planned. So you guys will have kind of leads from different reports. So there'll be reports that you guys have access to from rumors in the town, from long-standing stories that you've heard, like myths of things that have been happening in Arkham for years and years that the locals just take for granted. And so you'll have a number of different stories, leads, information, and you can decide as a group how you want to proceed and what you want to do in order to pursue them. So you might say we want to go and do this one mission in this one area of the city, and when you know generally what the mission kind of entails, there will be you'll know a vague benefit of what it might provide. So when I say that, let's say for example you're going to go to the university to look for, there's been some strange noises or people getting lost and getting confused in the basement of the catacombs underneath this university. One of the potentials that's available there is to get one of the professors on your side as a contact. And so once that person becomes involved with your team and with your organization, when you do other missions, you'll be able to roll and see if that person's available for you to go and talk to get information from. So instead of having to do all this legwork, you're like assembling like a team of resources that you can call upon. And some people might be like someone who's a merchant who can get supplies or exotic books from overseas. So if you need something and you can't find it in the library where you are or in your own personal library, you can sort of like roll and see if this guy can bring it in, how long will it take him to bring it in, resources to build weapons, to build all kinds of stuff. So there'll be, each mission will have like a loose representation of what you might be able to glean from that mission, whether the mission is a success or not. And success is very loose in the terms of like, if you say, okay, there's some strange noises in the basement of people getting confused in the catacombs of the university, and you go to the university and you talk to this guy who might become your contact, and you go down to the thing and maybe you find some weird clues, but you don't really figure out what's causing the noises, or
But
you
the
don't get
clues could
confused
be
or
a
whatever.
success.
Yeah, exactly. You might find some clues that give you information to another investigation. You still might successfully get this guy as your contact. Like you still, it doesn't matter. Like it might be like, it's not like the game where you're like, oh, you've got to go find X in Y. You go to Y, you find X. That's the mission success. It might not be that case. You might go to find X and Y, and you don't find X and Y, but you do find some sort of clue, some sort of you kind of continue to unravel the narrative, so to speak. The way that the game works as well is that there are different stages to each investigation. So, and the reason why this exists is because the game that I'm building has a sanity level. So everyone will start at a sanity level of, I'm going to say everyone. Everyone will start with a sanity level of 1. A sanity level of 1 means that you're gaining experience at a normal level. So if you successfully do a mission, and let's say the reward is 1 XP or 2 XP, you'll get 1 or 2 XP. Every time there are various events and various like elements that will cause you to roll on your willpower or roll on a stat to see whether or not you are afraid, or whether or not something happens, and there's a chart that I have that will sort of explain some of these things to you, and I'll explain more as the game unfolds as to how this works. But as your character starts to lose their sanity, their number will go up from 1 to 10. Each time you go up 1 level, so if you go from 1 to 2, you gain an 11% chance per level to get an extra point of experience. So if you go from 1 insanity to 2, you're becoming a little bit more unhinged, but you also have a greater chance of getting extra experience to make your character stronger. So, and then if you go from 1 to 3, now you've got a 22% chance to getting an extra XP. And that level will continue to increase up to a level of 10 when you get a 99% chance of getting an extra experience point. However, once you reach insanity, and every time you go up this ladder in insanity or losing your sanity, there is an additional element of like debuffs, basically, like elements in the game that will affect your ability to continue to operate as a normal individual in society. Like you're sort of becoming a little bit more suspicious, or you're becoming a little bit more edgy, or you're becoming a little bit, you start having nightmares, or you'll start like having delusions of various things when you're sleeping. And I've got a chart that will, and they're based on how you get these different insanity points, what debuffs you get as you go ahead. And as they get worse, they affect your character worse and worse. Once you are at, and of course, as you gain insanity points, as you lose your sanity and you gain these points, there is also more of a chance that you will continue to accrue more points, more insanity points. So the worse you get, the easier it is to continue sliding down that scale. once you're at 11, so if you're at 10 and you move to 11, you're basically give me your character,
Oh, that's kind of.
and that's the end of your character. However, the way that the game works is in the city where you guys are staying in Arkham, there is an asylum, and you can at any point.
This isn't a crossover Batman
No,
It
no,
It
Arkham.
actually used to be set in Arkham, Massachusetts. Like the asylum was actually in Arkham, Massachusetts.
from
in the
Batman.
comics,
Yeah, it was taken from, well, like it was all based on, so Lovecraft was the original. So
Oh, I know.
yeah, so anyway, so there's an asylum in Arkham, and at any point in time, any point, doesn't matter, as long as you have 2 or more insanity points, you can check your hero into the hospital in order to recover.
Oh,
And
that's different.
And as they recover, they will slowly lose their points of insanity. And you can choose, you'll know when you go in how long you leave them in for to like recover their sanity.
So they lose their experience.
No, they don't lose their experience points, they just lose their ability to get extra points. But it also means that while they're in there, you can't play them. So the plan is that every player will have the option of rolling new heroes, new investigators that have different skills. So if you start playing and you're like, oh, I'm going to play like a combat guy, and then after a few games he starts going loopy, and you're like, I'm going to check him into the asylum because I want to keep him. Then you check him in, then you roll a new investigator. The new investigator lives in the house with everyone else, and you might be like, oh, now I'm going to make a doctor. Now I'm going to make a researcher. Now I'm going to make an adventurist. You're going to make whatever. There's all these different, like a chemist or whatever you want. And so the plan is that you might make a character that is better at asking questions and is not very good at combat. So then at the beginning of each round, so to speak, at the beginning of each session that we have, we'll have like a prequel where people will be able to say, I'll say, okay, Fluency, you're playing Joe Schmo, who's a soldier. You've got Billy Bojangles and Dr. Boobry in the asylum, right?
Boobery and I go way back.
Right, exactly. And so you'll say like, so I'll say, Boobry is at a 4 and Bojangles is at a 7. Do you want to take either of them out for the adventure today? And like each investigation will have different phases. So the first phase might be like an investigation phase where you're going to be going to the university and talking to some guy and like looking for clues. You might think, oh, there might not be a lot of chance for combat, so I'm going to bring Boobry with me and I'm going to leave Bojangles in because I know there's not going to be combat. But then also there might be another stage of that same investigation where you're going back to the catacombs to fight some poltergeist that's in the catacombs. In which case you say, don't want to bring Boobry, I'm going to bring Bojangles because he's my combat guy.
Everyone else in the asylum.
You can leave them so basically you check people in and out of the asylum based on what your needs are. And at the beginning, everyone's going to have everyone, I keep saying this and I'll explain this on a second, everyone is going to have a number of, an insanity number of 1. And so, but as the game progresses, the plan is that hopefully people will have 2 or 3 different heroes in the asylum at any time, and you kind of choose to cycle them in and out as you see fit. And so, but you might not know, like you might say, oh, it's an investigation phase, so we don't need a combat guy. And then you go into the investigation phase and there ends up being combat for whatever reason. You have to deal with that. You won't know. Even though you feel like, oh, it's investigation, there probably won't be combat, you're kind of deciding how it's going to work. And that's also really going to change the team dynamic. Because there's going to be 4, 5, 6 people playing at once.
Not necessarily the same characters.
Not necessarily the same characters every time. And so you guys have to choose before you go out collaboratively. You have to, in this stage, before we start the session, you all have to kind of talk and say, okay, what are we doing this session? We're going to go, unless we're continuing existing session, you can't choose that stuff. But for the most part, I'm hoping that each session will be like a chunk of the adventure, and you'll be able to choose, okay, amongst yourselves, you might say, okay, we definitely need a scholar or like a librarianist to be a librarian to come with us because we need that. We need a research element. We definitely want to have a doctor with us because if one of us gets hurt, we need that assistance. Or we definitely need to have one combat guy. But then if it's an all-in-all combat session, you might be like, okay, everyone's going to bring a fighter and one guy's going to bring a doctor to heal, right, or to support. So you guys have to decide as a group how you want it to proceed. Additionally, there are, and I will really stress that it is very important, unlike other games that we've played in the past, that you try to balance out the party as much as possible, unless you're 100% certain what you think the outcome is going to be. And I can tell you, you can never be 100% certain. But I mean, even if you're 90% certain, then you can stack more combat heroes, but still make sure you have some other.
Decide as a group.
You decide as a group how, based on your stable of heroes, who you want to be playing that day, and also based on which characters, which players show up. So, like if Corey doesn't show up one week, and she's got like the strongest like melee character, if she's not there, you can't play her character. So who else is going to step in and take over that role? Another element that's really important is that now I'm going to provide a list of jobs. Everyone needs to have a job that they do outside of their investigation. And that sort of helps you choose what skills you have access to. Because it's the 1920s, it's not the same as like modern day where everyone's like, oh, I sort of do a little bit of everything. Like I drop ship t-shirts on Alibaba and I sell coffee to, I roast my own beans and sell them to this little coffee shop. No one did that. Back in the day, you choose a profession, and that was the profession that your character had. So if you're like, I was a professional athlete, that will give you access to certain skills, and you'll build your character and your character story around those skills. So there'll be jobs that will give you a little bit more of a kind of focus onto what skills you'll have, and there will be certain archetypes that there'll be a number. So let's say, for example, I choose like the fighter stereotype. There might be an ex-soldier. There might be a boxer. There might be a pugilist. There might be a wrestler. There might be a strongman from the circus. All of these are jobs that fit within that stereotype of fighter. So there'll be different like tropes or different like areas of and I'll give you all this information as well on in some sort of text format so you'll be able to choose. But there will be these different areas and there'll be different like occupations within those. But one of the things that I wanted to stress is that there is also going to be the option of having a doctor that is not a healer of body, but healer of minds. So
Like
someone who's a
psychiatrist.
psychologist or a psychiatrist, and those characters will be just as important as a healer on various adventures because they will be able to provide a bonus to not collect insanity points.
Like a
when you're
support
rolling
system.
when you're rolling an insanity point, the way that it will work, and I can't really explain it until you start playing. Exactly. So it's going to be this sort of when you gain an insanity point on an adventure, it's not permanent. At the end of that chapter, when you get back to your home base, there will be an opportunity for you to, if there is a psychiatrist or a psychologist in the party, to help you try and purge yourself of that point. Whether they say, we're going to do a period of intense therapy, or, oh, we're going to give you a shot of laudanum, or we're going to give you like whatever, like something to calm you down, to cool you off. And so if the doctor is in the party with you, then they're going to give you an additional ability to shape that point. You can also choose to not shape the point on purpose because you want to gain more experience. Now, the other thing as well that I'm also going to let you know is that so Ruben was part of the game that he and I played a little while ago where there was holy and unholy. There was like a light and a dark stat, and those moved up and down based on what you did. The world of Arkham has no light. The world of Arkham is purely always teetering on the edge of darkness. All of the supernatural powers and all the supernatural entities that you deal with are all tainted with evil in some fashion. So all of the benefits that exist outside normal humanity, like you and I being able to do 20 push-ups every day so we get stronger, like if there is any sort of like dark gift, so to speak, like magic, all this other stuff that might become available in the future of this campaign, they're all tainted with evil,
Menace.
with menace. So like for example, if you find a knife and you do research and you find, oh, this was used for sacrifice of children, of younglings, or whatever, you know, like you find this knife, you're like, oh, this was used to kill, like to sacrifice children for the Dark Lord, and you decide, but you also figure out, oh, this has got like a bonus to damage and a bonus to hit, or it's got this, it drinks blood and like heals me, or whatever like fantastical things might exist. It will always come with some sort of downside. And no matter what the downside is, it will also have an additional downside, which is that it will be a magnifier of losing sanity. So when you will roll to like avoid, in a situation where you might see something that's scary, you will roll your willpower, different items will give you debuffs to resist. So if your willpower is 10 and you roll a 9 and then you've got this knife that gives +2 to insanity, then you've now failed. So there's going to be a little bit of balance. I will also tell you that whatever artifacts that will or dark gifts that exist in the world, they're not going to show up for a good little while because they're very powerful and they're very rare, but they will also be extremely powerful. Anything that you get that is outside the mundane, if you choose to use it, not only might have bad effects for you, but it also might have bad effects for your entire group. That said, there is the potential when you find various things, there will be items that you find, neutral items you don't really like. You might just find a knife, you know, and be like, oh, I'm going to keep it, it's a dagger, and you use it. At the end of the game, I will be contacting various players privately to let them know whether those items have the potential to have additional talents, and then they have to decide, are they going to keep them? Are they going to keep them and tell the group? Or are they going to ask the group and say, okay, I found out that this item has this evil power. Are you guys cool with me keeping it or not? And then you know they can take a vote. So it's really up to you as you decide like how you want to proceed. That said, that's pretty much. I don't think there's nothing I missed. I don't think. Like Ruben and I have been building some of this universe together a little bit, based on some of the ideas of stories and stuff that he's written. So using some of his ideas as a kind of loose framework, so to speak. Do you guys have any questions about the way that the chapters work, or the way that the world works?
No, my plan is to figure it out as it goes along.
Yeah.
And that's really the way it should be. There's a number of things that I'm not mentioning because they will only become pertinent as they show up, and they might not show up. So it's better for me to just avoid that and just continue on as see fit. The other thing I wanted to mention is that so two things. First of all, the history of the players. Everyone should have some secret in their past as to why they might be as to why they might be interested or passionate about investigating evil or the dark arts. So, like for example, one of the examples that I sort of came up with is let's say when you were 8 years old, up until you were 8 years old, you had a twin sister. When you were 8 years old, your twin sister vanished. Your parents said that they didn't know where she was, and she was lost, and it took you a couple of years to get over it. And then when you were 11, you were playing in the basement of your home, and you found that you saw something sticking out. The floor was bumpy, and you dug in the floor there, and you found your sister's body was in the floor, and she was dead. Now, and because you're so young, and you figure like, oh, how did this happen? Clearly, someone's buried her here. Was it my mother? Was it my father? Was it someone else? Like, was it them both together? So you didn't say anything about it because you were scared that if you said something that You didn't know
might
who
end
to
up
trust.
with the
You had no clue
yeah.
who you trusted. So that always twisted and fucked you up a little bit from the past. So you've always been like passionate to like, you know, investigate all things weird
Dig deeper.
and to, yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, very good. So like that's really the case, right? You've always had this like overwhelming urge to like uncover something unknown.
Yeah.
You know, and because you never solved that mystery, you try to solve other mysteries to kind of like, you know, satiate that part of yourself. Now, to also go back to this, everyone starts at sanity level 1. As you're building your character, you're able to talk to me in private and let me know whether you want to start with a higher level with some level of loss of sanity, and you know, anything up to, I would say, like 3 or 4 at most would be acceptable. But
I just want to be straight psycho going into
Sure.
No, no.
So and you don't have to. It's not a requirement, but it will give you some added elements of role play. So if you're someone who likes to role play some secrets, like everyone should have secrets from each other. Now it's important. This game's a little different to like the last game we played, the one in the Frostpunk one, because whenever a
Is
new
that what you call it,
Frostpunk, yeah,
Is that an actual genre?
it's a quasi genre, yeah.
Is it kind of like
It's sort of like
theme based or?
yeah, exactly. It's like anything around like steampunk, but in like bleak, like bad weather, cold weather, post-apocalyptic Russia, you know, all that stuff is all based
Wasn't
on.
the technology not really from steampunk in that?
Oh yeah, I'm thinking of the campaign I did before you joined.
Oh,
That's what I'm thinking of. Sorry. So anyway, yes, I apologize. But yeah, I always put like that level of like of supernatural in the games to some degree. What was I saying? So
You're talking about everyone having a certain amount of sanity.
right. Thank you. So yeah, so in this game you have a little bit more freedom to have a little bit more eccentricities. And everyone, okay, so this is what I'm saying as well, is that like in the last game that we played, whenever a new character joined the party, you guys all had to sort of role play gaining that character's trust before you would play with them, and that makes the game very difficult because you have to spend like, you want to make it realistic, like some random person shows up and says like, oh, I'm your new buddy, you know, your new guy, and you're like, who the hell are you? Yeah. Show up in the middle of nowhere. The way that this game will work is that anyone who comes to the house, to live at the house, to like be a new hero, to be a new investigator, you're sort of going to be assumed that you're going to trust them. You have to. Like, even though everyone operates as an individual, you also have to operate as a family because you're all weird in some way, and you all have to count on each other to survive. So
we're all under the wing.
Yeah, you're all under the wing of this patron. Right. So it's important to like, and that's just something that I have to like sort of mention.
Like
so that, exactly. And you have to like more or less. Yeah, I mean, everyone.
Security checks.
Yes, everyone's gonna have like some weird like when you first meet a new hero, to some degree, of course, everyone's gonna be kind of like, oh, that guy acts kind of weird. He's got some sort of weird quirk. But then you immediately have to think, okay, my character has a bunch of weird quirks too. I'm just gonna take it for granted that they're on my side. No one is gonna like be joining the group that is like got some nefarious like other, you know, they're not gonna like stab you in the back or anything like that. Like if they fuck
They
up,
don't actually work for the Dark Lord.
Right, exactly. There's gonna be none of that, and that's important because the way that the game works, where you're checking you.
We had a lot of that in the old one.
Well, it's just the game got so long.
Yeah.
It was very like convoluted. But the way that this will work is that in order, because of the system of like characters going to the asylum and then new investigators joining, it doesn't work unless you just assume that everyone that you're playing with is like on your side and you're all working together. The other the reason why I made it so that you can check heroes into the asylum is to give players the freedom to sort of try new types of characters. I know that you, especially when a campaign goes for a long time, and you sometimes grow to not like your character. You're just like, I'm really getting bored with this character. And then, like in a couple of games that Fluency played with me, and in other games I played in the past, like longer campaigns, a player will sort of like message me privately and be like, you know what, I'm not liking the way this character is progressing. You know, is there a way that I can like kill him off, or is there a way that I can retire him and play a new hero? And it's very difficult in the game to do that, in normal games to do that, because it's sort of like a bit of a cop-out. Like if you don't like the way your character's working, you know, you sort of feel have to be like, well, you know, deal with it. You have to like learn to play him and learn to appreciate his nuances.
Yeah.
But when the campaign sometimes goes for a year,
and you've been
And
playing
six- yeah,
the
and
same
6
character and it's kind of plateaued and you're not getting character builds or
right, or you
you know.
get 6 months into it, you're like, oh, I really don't like the way this character, like I had this vision of this character progressing in this certain way and helping people in a certain way or doing certain types of combat. Like I want to always be a boxer. Like I don't want to use weapons, I just want to use my fists, right? And then you start playing and like 2 months in, you're like, like this combat is not working for me. I want to have a guy with guns. You can't really like re-roll your same guy and have him have guns. It's not really in game to kind of say, oh yeah, you can just retire him and start a new guy, because that sort of removes any accountability you have for making a character in the first place. People stop caring about the game and start caring about the character when they feel that they can just swap in and out at will. So the way this game works is to encourage you and to force you to do that, and to force you to see the greater good and the greater story as being the core dynamic. And then you're able to swap in and out your heroes at will to kind of like
emphasize that story and
right.
push that story.
So you don't feel like, let's say for example, you get into like, let's say everyone makes characters that are like super combat based in another campaign, like an army campaign, and you get into a room or an objective where you have to question someone. Just by being polite to them and asking them questions, and no one has the skills, you can't progress, you can't move forwards in that game. You think like, oh, we really wanted to like explore this part of the story, but because none of our characters are skilled in that way, we just have to let it go and assume like, oh well, we missed out. This is very different. This really allows you to like
explore every nuance.
Yeah, and you
detail.
might make a character and you get to level you get him to like sanity level 7, and you're like, okay, this guy is like, I gotta check him into the asylum. You check him in, you build a new guy, and then you love your new guy. You don't have to take that guy out of the asylum. When he gets to level 1, he'll just sort of move into Arkham, the town of Arkham, and just like say he's retiring from or he just wants to take a break or whatever, and he'll just
or
be
like he was at insanity level 7, just needs to leave it alone for a little bit. You know?
Right. So you'll have
Yeah.
You know,
right. So
like-
you'll have, but you'll also have the option.
I
to,
just
like,
dreamt that my legs were tentacles. Like I need a minute.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Even if you make that guy that got to insanity level 7, and then you make a new guy, and then you think, shit, the guy that got to insanity level 7, you know what? I really didn't like playing him all that much anymore. I love him, my new guy. There's no pressure for you to go back, even when that guy recovers. You don't have to instantly, like, when he gets to 1, pull him out.
He'll be okay.
Right,
He
yeah.
can find another profession.
Right, exactly. So there's that element of sort of like, you'll be able to actually retire heroes if you want to once they've been left in the asylum. And of course, and the other thing you have to notice is that like the amount of time it takes to get from an insanity level to a lower one is exponentially less based on how many points it is. So for example, to get from like 10 to 9, it might be 4 months. To get from 9 to 8, it might be 2 months. To get from
3 to 2.
yeah, it's
might
like
be
it's
2
like a
weeks,
week,
yeah.
right, or 2 weeks. So that it's going to be, so again, that's something that you have to sort of juggle, right? And you have to also keep in mind that any hero that gets checked into asylum, all of their equipment, all of their items are not available to any new hero. Like anything that they had, and I mean their information is more or less generally shared. But I mean, if you know, like all of the secret stuff that you haven't shared about your character, like if you had an item that you haven't talked about to the party, you know, it doesn't just become free reign in the house for your new guy and be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna use this knife. I know what it does because my other player is, he was his old one. You know,
Not the
it
gear
doesn't
bank.
work that. Yeah, it's like there's no shared stash between characters. So I'm gonna stop streaming now because I think that unless there's any other questions you guys want to like ask
Besides,
or
yeah,
anything else.
besides like obviously the new format, like is everything all the other rules like the basic GURPS like all the rolling and
All the other
like,
rules will be mostly the same. There will be some skills and some things that are obviously not applicable because of the time. The time difference means that there's different things available and like different technologies are available right in the 20s as opposed to now. But for the most part, everything else
basic
will
mechanics is the same.
exactly the GURPS mechanic will be identical. And the only thing that
level 4? Is that?
I think it's 4. The and I'll confirm this in the quick, but I've also created. I said this to you earlier, and you know about this already. There's an online sort of repository I use for it. Basically allows us to create a private wiki for like everyone who's involved in the game to be able to. I'll be putting documents in there so that if you want to read up on locations between sessions, you'll be able to do that. If you want to like read up about extra information and background, there'll be a ton of stuff in there to sort of let you acquaint yourself with how the 20s were, so that when you get in to play the game, you can sort of play 20s. The other thing I want to mention, which is really important to everyone watching from home, is that, and to everyone here as well, is that the 20s were a time. Like traditionally, the 20s were a time where like there was a lot of racism, there was a lot of sexism, there was a lot of like ignorance to various things. None of those things exist in the world that I'm making. They can't exist just because it is not fun to assume. Like, I mean, I've played games that are very realistic where you sort of have some of that stuff. Like if you play a female character, you're at a disadvantage because of your gender, and I've had to like work on ways to like equalize it out by giving women or giving people of different races or different creeds other advantages to balance it out. I don't want to handle that. I don't want to make it inappropriate in any way. So all of that stuff, we're basically assuming that in many ways, and I mean, there's some traditional stuff that will happen, like I mean, there are not the radio is very commonplace in newspapers and things like that. Like the stuff that's traditional to 20s that doesn't affect people's biases on things doesn't really apply all that much. But in terms of anything else that would make anyone uncomfortable, that stuff is left at the door. The only thing that I haven't really discussed yet is stuff like religion. And once we have all the players involved and everyone that I know is going to play, I'm going to sort of email everyone as a group, and people will be able to respond to me privately as to what their take is on how religion is going to be processed in the game. Because if someone has some sort of like strong faiths or strong beliefs, I don't want to involve those in the game in any way, and I'll just avoid that stuff altogether. But for the most part, the way that the Lovecraftian world works is there's all kinds of like elements of religion that are kind of mixed in with it, and so I would prefer to keep that in. But I've also developed like a Florida plotline that doesn't have any of that too. So we can all even vote on it, even if people are not religious or don't have sort of faith issues, and they're still like, let's just leave it at the door. I'm happy with that too. Like I don't want to make it weird.
Okay. I'm just thinking not to be controversial, but
Yeah.
if someone's really a Lovecraft fan, they would have already been offended by not
Right.
showing. But I don't know.
Yeah. I know, and that makes sense, and that's why it's supposed to be like Lovecraftian inspired. I don't want to make it. The thing with Lovecraft is that the way that any Lovecraft story works is there is no good ending. Everyone goes like nuts at the end. There's no happy ending.
Or it just stops.
Right, exactly. So I want to make it so that there is some excitement and enjoyment in playing the game. One of the things that I said to Raven though is that like the way that the world works is the world is a bleak place. Everyone, as they get more powerful, become more crazy and more weird and more bizarre. And so you will come to appreciate the small successes as much bigger than they are because of how the world works. And the only way you're going to be able to like come together and enjoy the game is to come together and enjoy the game together. You really can't play characters that are loners. You really can't play characters that have their own agendas because it's just not going to work. Like the way that the world works, I want to make it fun. I've played campaigns that are really bleak, and like everyone, like sometimes like we've all taken a vote to be like, let's just stop playing this campaign. It's not fun. No one's enjoying it. I'm not enjoying running it.
You
People
mistrust
aren't-
everyone, like your
Yeah.
character is like against everyone, like it's insane. It's weird sometimes.
Yeah, and that just happens. It's just like the way that, I mean, like when Fluency was part of my group, we would all take turns randomly like running games. Like we would all, like Fluency ran a game with he created this universe where everyone had like the ability to like embed like rocks, like crystals in their skin, and it allowed them to do different magic powers. And we started like going to town. Like, very cool. So like
The world is still cool. It's still
Right,
created somewhere.
right, and so that's my goal is to make this campaign into a game where characters players will be able to stop playing and be. So the reason why I say this is that in the system called Cthulhu, the GM is called the Keeper, and the players are called investigators. But the way that the game stresses is it says that anybody can be a keeper. So as the game progresses, if you decide that you want to run, like if I'm a keeper, I might have a character that I play within the game, and he's my guy. He's one of my heroes. He's one of my investigators. And then at some point, if like you decide I want to run a chapter in this game, you can become a keeper. Your character becomes like an NPC, and then my character that was an NPC becomes my. So anybody and any time can sort of play a one-off within the confines of the way that the world works. Because there is a lot of content within the game where you end up leaving the town of Arkham and going to an undisclosed location in the woods somewhere. You know, then it's not connected to whatever storyline I'm building. It's completely separate, and you don't have to feel that you're trying to like fit something in with my storyline, but it still fits in with the Lovecraftian elements. So you can decide to run a game, and you don't have to do it the same way that I'm doing it, where there's a stable of heroes. You can just be like, okay, whatever hero people want to play, they're going to stick with that hero, that investigator for the entire investigation, and then you run it that way. Like you don't have to use my elements. You could just be like, I want to do a one-off, and you can.
Just to switch things up. Or
Just
whatever.
switching that. Well, there's also a lot of templates. There's like I was saying to Drew, there's like 18 pre-made modules for 1920s Cthulhu. So if someone who is not familiar, hasn't done a lot of GMing before, hasn't run any games before, whether in GURPS or in D&D or whatever, and they want to give their hand at it, I would continue to help out from the like system perspective. But then they have an entire module that they can follow. It says what people, you know, when you talk to people, and it says if the person rolls well to talk, you give them this information. Like that's what modules are made for. They're made for people who don't have that same level of like expertise in running games to run a game. So you get to sort of figure out how to deal with characters doing stuff out of what you expect, but you still have a good structure to fall back on that's like safe. So if you want to kind of like, oh, maybe I want to start running games regularly with this group or with another group. You want to start your own group in the area where you live. I want to give everyone the opportunity to learn how to run a game as well. Because one of the things that I have always struggled with is it's really difficult for me to find games to play. Because I love the way that I run games, and I want to find other people that
Who run it
can
similarly.
who have that same level of creativity or have that same level, and I want to like promote that. So if anyone is interested in running stuff, I'd love to play, and there's no judgment. If you want to play, if you play one session, you're like, you know what, I don't know if this is for me. That's all good. We just stop that and we go back to what we were playing. Like, don't feel any pressure to continue it on or whatever. I just want to make it an open sort of environment for that to happen. I'm gonna pause the screen now.
Do you want a glass? We can get you a glass for the aloe vera.
Yeah.